Hi everyone, on today's episode we're talking about In Rainbows by Radiohead. We're talking about All Hell, the new record from the Welsh band Los Campesinos. We're talking about the kind of music that gets you through a long run like a half marathon. And last but not least, we're talking about a forthcoming album by the Smashing Pumpkins. Get ready. Like, subscribe, share with a friend. It's another Album of Record podcast. I'm Craig Lindell, joined as always by Andrew Schnitke. How's it going, Andrew?
I am doing exceptionally well today, Craig. I do regret to inform our listeners that because I am traveling, while I did remember to bring my podcasting setup, I forgot my new metal poetry book. So we're not going to have any entries this week.
Keep them wanting more.
Unfortunately. So we'll be back next week. I'll be back at home, and we'll have some more new metal poetry for you guys to enjoy. But yeah.
So
otherwise, I'm doing well.
Off the top, I wanted to kind of revisit the Radiohead episode just briefly because, as we talked about, doing an episode on a band causes you to go back and listen to that band. So the first thing I did was I started listening to In Rainbows again, and there was just a disconnect in my brain on In Rainbows. In Rainbows is a phenomenal record, and I had underrated it in my brain somehow and felt it was lesser than it actually is, just based on time and my human brain malfunctioning.
I have a theory on that.
Okay.
I think part of it is the way that it was released as well. So they released that online only first, and it was a name your own price experiment thing, but it wasn't on any of the streaming services yet, and you couldn't immediately get it in a physical medium. And I do think that probably hurt the perception from, people who are accustomed to listening to music one of those other ways. I can't remember how prominent streaming was. What year? I can't remember if streaming was very prominent yet, but certainly people were still listening to CDs at that time.
Yeah,
and I think
2008.
that it was. So I would guess that probably predates Spotify, like at least in terms of being widely popular. But I do think still just that the way they rolled that out impacted the way a lot of people perceived it. I think it made it easier to forget about it. At that time, I know I was listening to my music through my iPod Classic. I had my
Me too.
iPod Classic that was my primary way of probably listening to music. So I probably would have seen it on there, but it was still very, if you just downloaded it direct from them, you had to make sure you put it in your right iTunes library folder if you were on iTunes, or your Amazon Music folder. You had to have it in your library folder. And I just think it was a barrier to entry that I think probably impacted some people.
You know what? You're right. It was released October 10th, 2007. And then it was released in physical format January 2008. So 2 or 3 months later.
Yep. I just remember that was one of the first, they did it, and Nine Inch Nails did it, the whole name your own price experiment. And I don't know really what the outcome of that ever was.
No.
I don't know what knowledge they gained. It didn't seem to really change the way music was released or anything. But I'd be curious to know how they felt about it in that moment. But
well, and it's also one of those business models that's only available to a proven gilded artist. It's I know a lot of people don't like Louis C.K. anymore, but when he was at the top of his game, he was releasing all his specials direct to his audience on his website for a price. And it's okay, well, that's great for Louis C.K., who had a TV show on HBO and another one on FX, and was this proven commodity. It would work well for him, but it's not really for an up and comer. It doesn't really work.
Yeah, no, that's certainly the case. But to your point about In Rainbows, It is. I mean, it's a really good album, but like
Yeah.
it's also one that, and this is true of more than one Radiohead album, but it's another one where I personally don't find a lot of singles that I would pull out from that and say like, oh, this song is, this is a banger. It to me, In Rainbows is an album that needs to be listened to beginning to end. It's got
Agreed.
a really natural flow to it. Yeah, so it's really good. We definitely, we had some time constraints and we had to rush through some of the later era Radiohead stuff. And I think we probably gave off more of a perception than we intended to of us not liking that or thinking that it wasn't worth talking about. Whereas for me, like I would still say The King of Limbs is an album that I have no desire really to listen to again. It just didn't connect with me at all.
Yep.
But outside of that, every other album, like while they're not those late era ones, may not be my favorite Radiohead albums. I have no problem going back and listening to those, particularly In Rainbows and Moonshaped Pool. I think both those albums are still excellent albums.
But to your point, unless we're talking about the Bends, and maybe even OK Computer to some degree, Radiohead is not a singles band. They're not the kind of band that I would throw a song or two here on a playlist
Right.
after OK Computer for sure, because they're just records that need to be played in order. But I feel the same way about Nine Inch Nails too.
Yeah.
All right, so since we last met, you added an accomplishment to the resume. You told everybody that you were going to run a half marathon. You have run that half marathon.
I did. And it was interesting. So to give a little bit of backstory, I ran cross country 4 years in high school, but I wasn't any good at it at all. I never ran varsity. I was JV all 4 years.
One of those participation trophy era kids, man.
Yeah. So I initially did it because I wanted to get into shape for basketball. So I had a couple people tell me, run cross country, like it'll make basketball so easy. So I was like, oh, that makes sense, and I needed something to do in the fall since I decided I wasn't going to play football. So I ran cross country. I didn't care for running much, but just did it. I had some friends on the team and just really tried to have fun with it. I never took it seriously. Well, I didn't end up making the basketball team, but I still stuck with cross country just for something to do more than anything. So from the moment that cross country was done, I didn't run again seriously until I was 40 years old. So I went a very long time without running. But then over the last couple of years, I've started to take fitness a little more seriously. And I think about 3 years ago, I did just a 5K, which for me felt like a huge accomplishment because I hadn't done it since my senior year of high school. So I was really proud of that. Did a couple more of them, and I was still just running recreationally, and I just felt like this year I wanted something to challenge myself with, and it's always been one of those things. Like I just kind of wondered, like, can I actually run a half marathon? Like, could I actually do it? So I looked and found one that I could sign up for, and I followed a training plan I found online. I would say training was pretty mixed. So I went into it with the goal I wanted to run it in under 2 hours. When I started my training, I having no idea of how hard that would be, but I just thought, well, I mean, that's like I think it's 9:08, maybe something like that per mile. I think is the pace for 2 hours. I thought, well, that seems easy, like I think I can do that. Like if I run 2 or 3 miles, like I'm running those in 7 or 8 minutes. So, how hard could it be? Right.
Yeah.
And, well, then I got into training and, had a couple of injury setbacks and the heat and humidity here was just brutal. And I just saw my pace times just plummeting. And I would say for the last month when I was doing, 9-10 mile runs, my pace was close to 9:40. And so I had just given up. I was like, well, I'm not gonna run it in under 2 hours, and that's fine. Like I just sort of changed my goal. I was like, my goal is really just to finish. I just want to be able to do it and say I did it. And so we'll get into this a little bit, but the playlist I had made to listen to while running, I had intentionally set it so I knew where the 2 hour, mark was. And as I'm getting to like miles 11 and 12, I'm like, I feel like I'm way ahead of my play. Like I can remember, like I got a lot of songs before I get to that 2 hour warning song. And so sure enough, I ended up finishing 1 hour, 52 minutes, 33 seconds. Which I was extremely happy with. I mean, I was over the moon. I couldn't have been happier, more proud of it. It was around a 8:30 pace, I think. And I don't have a firm explanation for why I ran it so much faster, other than probably one, adrenaline, I'm sure. And I can't even credit like, oh, it was because I was racing people, because after the first mile, there was nobody visibly in front of me and nobody visibly behind me. I ran my own race the entire time, pretty much. So I can't say that there was that aspect of it, but it was definitely adrenaline. I would say it was the carb loading. I definitely carb loaded like crazy the 2 days prior. And it was also sort of just the realization that, like, as I was running, like I was definitely feeling it, get to that 11 mile, like, because I'm in uncharted territory. 10 miles was my longest training run. So when you get to that 11-mile mark, you're like, okay, I don't know what's about to happen here. But I just kind of told myself, like, hey, this is it. Like, you don't have to run tomorrow. You don't have to run the day after that if you don't want. Like, just keep going and see what you can do. And so I'm really happy with it. It was exciting for me personally. It's, I don't know, like it's not like the most impressive thing in the world or anything like that. But for me, it was just something I was happy about and very happy with my time.
Yeah, it's great. Were there any like terrified moments, like where panic attack type moments? Because I've had those in longer runs before, that you like got to get over it after the first 4 miles or 5 miles.
So we'll get into this. Thanks to the playlist I had, I really cruised through the first probably like 6-7 miles. I was just in a zone, and I wasn't thinking about anything. I wasn't feeling anything. I was just running, and I was just keeping a really consistent pace. Somewhere around miles 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there, like my back actually like really started tightening up, and it was getting fairly painful. And I had one moment where I was like, man, if this keeps getting worse, like I might be in trouble. So that was a little bit of a concern. This was a mostly flat course, but like the things you don't think about, but when you started it, the first mile, there were a couple like good downhill things. Yep. And this was an out and back course. It was a trail course. So it was like 6.5 miles out and then 6.5 miles back. And you just kind of didn't think about it when you were going out on that first mile, and you're just, you're in the race. You're not even thinking about elevation or anything. Well, coming back, hitting those uphills, coming back in the last mile, those were definitely pretty painful. I was not thrilled when I hit those uphills for the last mile, but other than that, like nothing too crazy.
All right, so let's talk about the music, how you kept yourself motivated while you were running. Hit me with it.
So what I did was, so I started with Pearl Jam, Drink, Just Breathe, because I wanted the reminder to myself not to go out too fast, which of course I went out too fast anyways. It wasn't too fast, but it was faster than I intended to. But I had the Just Breathe because I like really wanted to focus on my breathing, because that was a good way for me to always gauge my pace, was, my breathing. I knew like how my breath would feel when I was at the right pace. So I started out with that, and then I went right into the entire Dark Matter album. And I did this sort of strategically, because when I did my long runs, my 9-10 mile runs, I had the hardest time with the first half. Like, there's a difference when you're counting up versus counting down. Like, when you start the race, like those first miles, you're like, okay, it's mile 1, mile 2, mile 3. But at some point it flips and you're like, all right, 4 miles to go, 3 miles to go. And I find the counting down part much easier than the counting up part. And so I really wanted something that I could really just lose myself in, something that was familiar, like a warm blanket, if you will, comforting, like,
Yeah.
sort of like a soul food type thing. And I had listened to Dark Matter a lot while training, because I had started my training around the same time that Dark Matter came out. So I was listening to it a lot anyways. So I kind of knew like how I should feel as that album progressed. Like, I kind of had it in my head, a comfortability with where I was at as that album was playing. And it was probably my first clue that I was running at a pretty good pace, because when Setting Sun was over, it did feel like I was pretty far ahead of where I felt like I should have been, maybe. But still, that entire album, I just lost myself in the music. I didn't think about the race. I didn't think about how I was feeling. I didn't think even about how fast I was going. It was just like autopilot for me. And so that got me through the first, 6 miles, no problem. And so that was done intentionally. And then after that, I sort of went, I went with The Armed. I went with Patient Mind as a transition song. And then I threw in a little Pixies phase. I did 3 Pixies songs, which was again, and then I ended that segment with Soft Kill, I Wish You'd Go. And my point with that segment was I knew it would be in the middle-ish part of the race, and I just wanted something to like transition myself, and then I was going to hit the hammer down. And when I say I hit the hammer down, I went with a song which I think you remember. I know we've talked about this band, Hazing Over, the song Jock.
Yes.
So I went with that then. So like all of a sudden you're just like hitting it. Then I went in with some Knocked Loose. This I had some Deftones in there. Like, this was my segment of grind it out, push yourself through that phase. And then I knew as I was getting towards those last couple miles, I wanted again to fall back into some like sort of comfort music. So I went with a couple Filth is Eternal songs as like a warning to me, like, hey, we're getting to that point. And then I went with a Queens of the Stone Age section. I put in like 2 or 3 songs of Queens of the Stone Age. And that was my like, all right, here we go. And then I ended it with Titus Andronicus's A More Perfect Union. And it was the perfect length to get me. It pretty much ended almost exactly at 2 hours. So I had it in my head, because that's a 7 or 8 minute song. So I had it in my head, like, when that song comes on, if you're close to that last mile, just push it to that song and see if you can actually do it. And then after that, like, I threw in like 15 minutes worth of like just random stuff. And I was like, because I thought maybe that's where I was going to finish. I was like, if you're later than 2 hours and 15 minutes, you're going to be pretty annoyed and pissed off. So then I just threw a bunch of Harm's Way songs at the end of just to like get out the frustration, if you will. But it was funny because I remember specifically, I also had a Tool Stinkfist in there. And that was even before the Deftones. And I got to Stinkfist at the end of, I think, mile 11. And that's when I knew. I was like, wait, I've got Deftones, Filth is Eternal, Queens of the Stone Age. Like, I got a lot of stuff here before I get to Titus Andronicus, which I knew was my 2-hour warning. And so that was my first clue that I felt like, because I wasn't looking, I was intentionally actually not looking at my watch I didn't want it in my head. I just didn't want it in my head. I wanted to just run my race. So I had no concept at that point of what my time was like, other than just my knowledge of my playlist. So
See, I would always look at my watch when I pass mile markers, because they have mile markers out there. You're gonna
oh
know,
yeah,
where you are.
yeah. Most people do. Like I would assume most people probably do check their times. It was just a weird thing with me, not knowing what to expect. I just didn't want anything in my head. I really just wanted to run my race, and I'm really glad I didn't, because I honestly wonder if I would have known how far ahead I was of my pace, if I might have slowed down, thinking, well, you've got time to kill, and would I have slowed it down, and would that have thrown off my race?
See, and I've run a lot of races. My serious racing days are behind me, but it would always, by looking at it, I would always get more aggressive. There was only maybe 2 races ever where I was just miserable and just, I'm just gonna finish. I'm just gonna finish. But all the other times, I've been pretty lucky and fortunate just to feel good on race days.
Yeah.
My best ever, because I used to be a pretty serious runner. I did a half marathon in an hour and 35 minutes, and in those days I had the playlist locked down on the time that I wanted to hit. But over the years, I've run a lot shorter races, a lot less aggressively. But for me, I always try and start as fast as possible. And so my first 3 songs have never changed. My first 4 songs have never changed. And it's really funny because usually these races, somebody plays the national anthem. And so when you're at the starting line and they're playing the national anthem, I've got Bulls on Parade playing, and I go from Bulls on Parade into Sugar by System of a Down, because that is like maybe the fastest paced. You want to get your running cadence way too fast, listen to Sugar. And then from Sugar, I go into Eyeless by Slipknot. You can't see California without Marlon Brando's eyes.
Yep.
And then I kind of take the gas off a little bit. So then it goes into The Economist by Mansions, and Something by Hopalong, and Recover by Churches, like Mind Over Matter by Young the Giant. Like, all right, we're going to find our forever pace. But the one thing that I've also always done is, no matter what race I'm running, I kind of go in the playlist and I figure out, as I'm entering that last mile, I want From the Kettle Onto the Coil by Deaf Heaven to start, because that's not only an awesome, crazy song, it's 6 minutes and 37 seconds, and then it goes straight from there into The Pecan Tree by Deaf Heaven. And so I know by the time I'm hearing Deaf Heaven that I'm close to the finish and I can power through no matter what.
That's what my Queens of the Stone Age was supposed to be for me, was that warning, like, hey, it's sort of like the
thank God we listen to aggressive music, man, because it's perfect for battling through a run.
I know. But I was thinking, like, it to me, like, I was thinking of the Queens of the Stone Age as kind of like Inception, when they use the music to warn you that, like, hey, the kick is coming, so you got to get prepared so you can ride the kick back up. That's kind of like what it was supposed to be from Queens of the Stone Age, but instead it was like it wasn't so much a warning. It was just like, holy cow, I'm going to finish this before Queens of the Stone Age are even over, like, which was just wild to me. So. And the funny thing is, the
playlist is so money.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It was fun to put it together and really think about and be strategic about how I did it. I'm curious, like, if I do another one, which I don't know if I will, but if I do another one, I have sort of mixed feelings about the way I did it with giving bands like sections. I might try to mix it up a little bit more and not have entire sections for bands, but I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it because it worked for me. But
so I've also run enough races that I did podcasts for certain races or audiobooks for other races, and my times would always suffer when it wasn't music. And so I quickly experimented and abandoned those things because I really wanted to race. I wanted to challenge myself. I didn't want to just finish.
Yeah. I think the one thing I will say is, for me, though, I could see myself always picking an album to start with. That just worked really well for me mentally.
Yeah.
Because, and I do think it would probably change now that I know what to expect a little bit. But I was really like in my own head about like, gosh, I just don't know like what that's going to, yes, I've run 10 miles, but like that's 3 more miles you got to do after that, and it's like, so there was just something comforting about being able to just lose myself in dark matter for for however long that 50 minutes or however long it is, you
Yeah.
just kind of lost myself in it, and I just really felt great for that entire section. I mean, I just really felt great with that run.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'm one of the other things that I didn't put on our agenda to talk about today, but I saw that we're supposed to get the high quality version of Spotify by the end of the year.
Oh, I missed that. Oh, I
And so
can't wait for that.
I think it's going to be $5 more a month, $60 more a
Take my
year,
money.
and yeah, it'll be an easy one. But it also means that I'll probably sync, to save myself some streaming data. I will probably sync more playlists and have more music downloaded onto my actual phone. Um, but man, I cannot wait for that, because just having that extra level of fidelity on all the music, the convenience of streaming is just can't be beat, but the quality is a little bit less for sure.
Yeah, I can't remember if we talked about this on the podcast or not, but I know I talked about it with you. When Spotify started messing around with changing, the payouts to artists, it hit a point where I just really didn't feel great about Spotify at that time. And so I actually messed around with Apple Music and Tidal. I basically cut myself off from Spotify for about 2 months, maybe. Uh, and I didn't like the Apple Music experience at all, but I really enjoyed 90% of Tidal. And the biggest thing was the sound quality. Like, it was just such a stark difference in listening to the quality of music on Tidal. And obviously that should be the most important part, but ultimately, like, there were some UI problems, some things I couldn't manage my playlists the way I prefer to with Spotify. I couldn't do that with Tidal, and Tidal's predictive algorithm was not quite as good as Spotify's. So ultimately, I did go back to Spotify once my Tidal trial was up. Uh, but like, I still find myself missing that sound quality. So I'm very excited for Spotify to be giving us that option. I will so happily pay more money for that. So
Yeah, the algorithm, the recommendation engine, and kind of the automated playlist stuff on Spotify is still, you don't have to like Spotify or how they act, but they do some things well, and it's just undeniable. And so yeah, that's kind of where I am.
yeah, if you're the type of person that really enjoys discovering new music, I just don't understand how you could possibly like Tidal or Apple better. And I say this as
Yeah.
somebody who spent a lot of time, working with those, trying to really, like, I had a very much an open mind. I wanted to leave Spotify. I wanted to use something else. But they just couldn't quite do it for me. So
All right. So should we move on to Smashing Pumpkins?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So this week we found out that there's a Smashing Pumpkins record on the way. And unlike their last one, Adam, which was 33 songs and
3 discs.
sprawling, and I think mostly forgettable. If and I'm not trying to trash it. I appreciate all the elder artists, the elder statesmen continuing to try and make new music. But yeah, it just didn't really work for me. But now it sounds like Billy Corgan spent all this time saying, we are the same group that made Siamese Dream. I've got all those tools still. I could make another Siamese Dream, and he was kind of being boastful as Billy tends to be. But now it kind of sounds like this new record, Agorimori May, which I won't even attempt to try and spell that for you. Just look it up. Um, maybe it's their version of dark matter. Maybe it's their version of trying to capture what they were way back when. It's 10 songs. It's about 45 minutes long, and we'll see, man. I can't wait to hear it.
I was gonna volunteer to trash Adam for you since
Yeah, go for it.
you didn't want to, but I don't know. Maybe I should. I'm sorry, it's not good. It's just not good. I listened to it. I wanted to like it. Like I have wanted to like new Smashing Pumpkins music for so long. Like this is a band that I love. It's an artist I respect the hell out of. Like I want to be in on Smashing Pumpkins, but it just didn't do it for me. But
Well, do you remember some of the conversations we had about it? Because one of the big ones, and this is something kind of deep that you and I talk about, is like maybe they've perfected production almost to a detrimental degree, because these records sound so perfect. And when you've got a drummer like Jimmy, when you get a drummer like Jimmy Chamberlain, it's almost like you want to reduce the amount of compression. You want it to sound more like it's still in the garage or whatever, the quote unquote garage. But you want to hear those little imperfections and those little dynamics and the flourishes that he does on the hi-hats and the different cymbals and everything else. And when everything is brought up in the mix and everything sounds so perfect, it turns Jimmy Chamberlain into sounding like a drum machine, and he is that good. But when he's sounding his best, you can actually kind of hear all the, not imperfections, but all the little things. And I feel like you can't hear those anymore.
They managed to make him irrelevant, and that's a problem. Like when you listen to it, I'm sure, people who are drummers, I'm sure they still find things in it. But like for me, somebody who has noticed Jimmy's drumming on everything else he's done, it just was non-existent. Like like you said, like it could have been a drum machine. Like it would have had the same emotional impact on me. And I just feel like it's like that Smashing Pumpkins album is just like if you like dumped a bunch of bleach into a room to clean it. Like it's very effective at cleaning the room, but like it's too clean. Like it's, it smells like bleach, and that it's a hollow, sterile listening experience. And I don't know. I like I've heard Billy Corgan talk in the past about how he's capable of writing another Siamese Dream if he wanted to. He has not been shy about it. He has said everything that he has done has been intentional. He is somebody who has always had his eye forward, and he never wanted any element of an album to sound anything remotely like anything they've done before. And there's something admirable about that. Like I can respect that. But you also have to realize, and this is sort of the Rivers Cuomo thing too, with like Weezer, like you run into a certain point where you're alienating your fans though, because your fans do like that element. And I can, as we do with everything related to Pearl Jam, like I would argue that not many Pearl Jam albums sound the same. They each have their own feel or sound to it, but there's always those connecting elements. You could hear a weird Stone Gossard riff that he writes. You could hear the Ed like punk infused thing, like the Jeff Ament rhythmic arrangement. Like these are things that run through every Pearl Jam albums, and that as somebody like for me this is why Pearl Jam is my favorite band. I connect to those elements, and as long as those elements are there, even when the songwriting isn't their best, I'm still going to just enjoy those elements and those combinations of sounds and songwriting and styles. Like I'm in the bag for that. And if you're like Billy Corgan and you're like, well, I don't want anything to do with what I've already done. I want an entirely new direction. That's great. But like, if you don't really nail that, and we can again talk about how Radiohead kind of did this, where they sort of progressed through, a 3 or 4 album cycle where, yes, they were constantly progressing, but they were nailing it every time. And Billy just
Yeah.
hasn't quite stuck the landing with that. And so I am intrigued by this idea that he's finally sort of relenting and saying, you know what, fine,
Well,
let's
but
do it.
even latter Smashing Pumpkins into the 2000s, and if you're willing to also, it's not a Pumpkins record, but it's a Billy Corgan record, so the Zwan records. So you got Machina, got the Machines of God, and you've got the Zwan records. Those are both phenomenal records that they're they sound like songs that have singles on them, and you can like chew them up and swallow them. There was just something unapproachable and undigestible about a 33 song Adam that, maybe he feels like it's a step forward, but it's like it's maybe it's too far above our heads as music fans. Like,
Yeah.
I'll give him that because he is a musical genius,
Oh, yeah.
but like at some point you also have to serve a market, you have to serve an audience, and I feel like maybe he lost that a little bit. And I'm hoping we get the best version of that balance between Billy doing the things that he needs to do to satisfy himself, and also the stuff that gives me joy as a fan. Because I'm rooting for it, but he's kind of missed the mark in recent years for me.
Yeah. Like even the release schedule, too, of the 3 parts, like releasing them over different time periods, just sort of, I don't know, like just gave it a sort of disjointed feel to it. Um, but I just want to circle back. Like I do think it's intriguing at a time when, I look at like the last Queens of the Stone Age album was sort of an album where it was definitely like what I would call a return to form album for them. And you can hear all these elements of different aspects of their career. Like I remember when I listened to it, like at one point I charted out every song on it and I was like, okay, this song has elements of Rated R and Songs for the Deaf. This one has some Lullabies to Paralyze to it. Like you could go through and it was like revisiting that old sound, but doing it in a way that felt new and fresh. Pearl Jam did this with Dark Matter. We discussed that ad nauseum. I would argue that this new Los Campesinos album that just came out sort of does that same thing. It feels new and fresh and vital for them, but it's not like they're pushing new boundaries. You really hear them retracing the steps of the albums that came before it. And Ian Cohen's review for Pitchfork even talks about this. Like, you hear
Well, let's take a quick
elements.
step back. Explain Los Campesinos to anybody who doesn't know Los Campesinos with an exclamation point.
How do we even describe them? They're a
Okay,
UK
well,
band
I'll start.
who,
Yeah, they're from, I think they're from Scotland or something. But yeah, they're this very large musical collective. If you follow them on social media, they act like a family. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. And they make this kind of offbeat indie rock. It's kind of, sometimes it sounds a little bit lo-fi, maybe.
sometimes
But
indie, sometimes ventures the other way into punk. Even like there are parts that
the lyrics are crazy. The words that they manage to weave into their stuff is kind of insane sometimes, but
yeah.
it works. Their lead singer has attitude for days, but he's like a sweet guy at the same time, and just the it's a weird band, but they're oddly musical, oddly dancey,
Yeah.
um, and their entire fan base, their entire vibe just feels very familial, and everybody's rooting for everybody, and everybody just wants everybody to be happy, even when they're singing sad songs.
Which they almost always do.
When they did an entire record called Hello Sadness, which is
Yeah,
just it's my favorite record, but it's a dirge.
it is. But I think you hit on it. Like, I mean, even down to the fact that, like, for the longest time, they all used the last name Campesino was, sort of like a play on the Ramones, if you will. But it was, I don't know, like, it feels reductive to say this, but they were just a cool band. Their whole vibe was just cool. They exuded coolness in every aspect of everything they did.
They're from Cardiff, Wales. I don't want to.
Yeah, Wales.
Give them the wrong
Scotland
hometown.
didn't feel right to me, but I wasn't positive.
Yeah.
So, they've put out, what is this, their 7th album? Maybe. So they've.
Seven members.
Yeah, it's a big group, big collective. But anyways, they went
their
through.
First records were in 2008. Their biggest record is Romance is Boring from 2010, Hello Sadness 2011, No Blues 2013, Six Scenes 2017, and then they took a very long time off till this All Hell came out in 2024 and got Best New Music thanks to Ian Cohen on Pitchfork.
Yeah,
and I'll speak for us. We love Ian Cohen. We love his reviews, and it's just it made me very happy that they allowed him to write that review, and they also allowed him to make it Best New Music.
It was a fantastic review too. Like, and I even on an Ian Cohen scale, like, I thought it was one of. I mean, it's up there in his echelon in terms of really explaining much better than we've been doing. Like, if you want to know the vibe of Los Campesinos, read Ian's review of All Hell and Pitchfork. Like, he explains the vibe of this band so much better than we've been trying to do here. But really, like, the reason we're sort of talking about this again is because this new album, he sort of says, he doesn't want to say it's their best album because, I really liked this from Ian. He's like, it might be offensive to people who have like a prior Los Campesinos album might be the most important album in your life, and he doesn't want to trample on that. And I loved that phrasing by Ian, because it was a great way of saying it. Like, because, like, for me, it's Romance is Boring. Like, that seemed unimpeachable to me. There's no way I could ever like a Los Campesinos album more than Romance is Boring. But, like, I don't know. Like, do I like this new album more? Like, it's possible. Like, it's early, but it's that good. But so he said it's not their best, but he'll say it's like the essential Los Campesinos album. And that is so spot on, because, again, you are going to find things that you like from every phase of their career on this album. And my point in all of this,
honestly, No Blues and Six Scenes are phenomenal records too.
They are.
I wouldn't blame anybody if they came along at those times and those were their favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly didn't spend as much time with those albums as I did the earlier ones. I would say Hello Sadness was probably the last one that I, like, really gave an appropriate amount of time and listens to. But my point in all of this, I guess, in bringing it back to Smashing Pumpkins, is, like, I fully believe Billy can deliver this. Like, he can do that for the Smashing Pumpkins. And I hope he sees, like, look around, like, look at your peers who are doing this. Like, it's okay to do that. Like, you don't have, it doesn't have to be reductive. Like, like, Dark Matter is not reductive. In Times New Roman, the Queens of the Stone Age album, is not reductive, but they are, if you want to use the word fan service, like, they are paying some fan service on this, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I just really, like, Billy's capable of giving us a great album that can lean on those things without sounding intentionally, like, reductive of those prior albums. So I'm intrigued. I don't like to get my hopes up with Smashing Pumpkins, but I hope it's great, but even if it's not, like, I hope Billy still allows it to be streamed, because the one thing that annoys me about Smashing Pumpkins is still that Zeitgeist is gone. He has tried to
Yeah.
unwrite that from the Smashing Pumpkins history. You cannot buy that anywhere. It is not streaming anywhere. Like, he has completely disavowed that as an album. And I kind of liked that album. Like, it
Well,
wasn't.
he did that because the feedback was so bad on it, and it was kind of like, well, you don't like it, fine, then it's gone.
Yeah, it was so childish. Like, you're an artist. Like, that this is a piece of art that you created. There's gonna be people that it connects with. Like, let us have it. Like, I have not listened to it since I got rid of my CD player, because I had it on CD, and that was my last way of listening to it. And like, I don't have any way of listening to Zeitgeist right now, and that's a bummer.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to steal a copy of it off the internet, and I'm going to send it to you, and we're going to re-listen to Zeitgeist.
There we go.
Like, it's the internet, man. Everything deserves to be free.
Yeah.
And I'd gladly pay for it, but
absolutely,
if you're not going to make it available, it's petulant. And obviously Billy Corgan has a tendency to veer into petulance. There's no amount of complaining about it that's going to stop him. And in fact, complaining about it probably will only make it worse. But okay, fine.
I was going to make a Weezer
By the way,
joke.
the Zwan record is basically unavailable as well.
Yeah. Yep. And I feel like those were around the same era too, right? Like, so I was going to make a joke about Rivers Cuomo saying, like, well, he doesn't pull, but then I realized, like, I couldn't decide what the most embarrassing Weezer record is, so I can't make that joke. But like, Zeitgeist is not the most embarrassing Smashing Pumpkins, is not the worst Smashing Pumpkins album. Like, I don't know. I'll digress on it, but it drives me nuts that, like, I'm being punished from an album that I like, because he got pissy about the way critics received that album. Or maybe it was fans.
I think it was.
Too.
I think it was fans too.
I think fans probably didn't like it too, but I don't know. It annoys me.
Yeah.
I have such a love-hate relationship with Billy Corgan. Like,
mine's mostly love, but I'm with you.
Yeah. I don't really mean literal hate, but like, just annoy relationship. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and Zeitgeist received mixed reviews. It had a 59 out of 100 on Metacritic.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pull up the oh, here we go. The Pitchfork review was 4.9.
Okay. Did they even review the last one?
Yeah, I don't know. But like, a lot of it's just sour grapes because James and Darcy weren't on this record. And it would be great if bands kept their original lineups forever and ever and ever. Amen. But it doesn't always happen. It doesn't always happen. I mean, how many hours have we spent talking about Pearl Jam drummers at this point?
Yeah.
But it's a miracle that so much of Pearl Jam has stayed together. It's a miracle, in my mind, that Smashing Pumpkins still has both Billy and the drummer, and that James is back.
By the way,
it should be good enough.
Pitchfork did give Adam a 6.3. So,
wow.
And then they gave...
That's pretty shocking, actually.
Yeah, they gave Sir, CYR, the previous album, which is worse. They gave that one a 5.5.
That was an Ian Cohen review. Adam was not Ian Cohen.
Yeah. Not Adam was not. Sir was Ian Cohen. And then Shiny and Oh So Bright was a 3.4. Which was, I don't know, that was when he was going to do like a multi-part, I don't know, or something. We got Monuments to an Elegy, 6.0. Like Again, like, that one is also Ian, by the way. But but
And then they went back in time and they reviewed Siamese Dream in September 2023 and gave it a 9.1.
Yeah. Oceana got a 6.3. But like, they're like, prior to seeing that Oceana, like, when's the last time you even thought about that? Like,
yeah,
they have so many albums that, like, I don't know, it felt sort of like Billy started to want to do one thing, and maybe, I don't know, like, it felt like he just never really wanted to get through to the finish line and just kind of put them out. A lot of these just don't feel finished to me, but
yeah.
I'm sure he would
Well,
be
and it's
pissed off
also
at me having that opinion. But
and if he went back, and I know Billy's always going to be the dominant songwriter, but if he went back and worked with the entire group, that was when we went back and talked about Dark Matter. That felt more like a band recording. But beyond Pearl Jam, I've talked about this with Death Cab because they've had some lineup changes too. And one of the records they kind of wrote where they're trading ideas over the internet during the pandemic, and that kind of brought the two new members into the writing process. And I thought their last record was maybe their best record in 6 or 7 years, because all right, these quote unquote new members have now been around the better part of a decade, and they're involved, not just hired guns on the tour. They're now part of the writing process. They're writing parts and singing harmonies, and you know all things being equal, if you have a band and you value all the members, to allow them all to contribute their parts and to the writing process. That's something that Dave Grohl's done over the years. His first couple records were essentially solo records where he basically played every instrument. But over time, as his members have become more integral parts of the group, and now they're this fully formed band. It's no longer the Dave Grohl show, even though Dave Grohl takes up the most oxygen and has the most gravity.
sure,
All those other members contribute in massive ways to what those songs turn into.
yeah, and I mean, I don't know anything about the recording process of this new Smashing Pumpkins album, but it'll just be curious to see like where he's at with that. And I don't know. Like I said, I'm sure you can listen to this and think like, oh man, I sound like I really dislike Smashing Pumpkins, but I'm being genuine when I say like I really like Smashing Pumpkins. I really like Billy Corgan. I root for him. I want this album to be great. I'm hoping that it is, but like I just try to have a cautious optimism with them because I don't know what we're gonna get. So I'm excited for it.
You and I have, everybody, most people who listen to this podcast are, around our age. We probably listen to more new music than most people, but I've listened to thousands of albums and thousands of artists, but Smashing Pumpkins are one of my top favorite bands of all time. So nobody's rooting against them here.
Right.
Nobody at all.
Yep.
And I don't want them to just make Siamese Dream over and over and over again, but I do want a record in the style of those old school 90s records where it's 10 to 12 songs. It's under an hour, and I want some bite-sized, not even singles is the wrong word because that harkens back to the radio era, but like I want something that like, oh yeah, I would definitely pull that out and throw that on a playlist. And I don't think that's asking too much. I don't think that's asking a band to sacrifice their identity or their artistic integrity. It's just my preference.
Yeah, like some of these albums I talked about, Sir, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. Sear, I don't know how. CYR, Oceana. Like if you listen to Siamese Dream and Melancholy, like where are the through lines from those to these other albums? Like they just don't sound like the same band, and I know that's supposed to be the point, but like I just go back to what I said originally. Like we became fans of Smashing Pumpkins because we loved that dynamic, that way of songwriting. And like, I'm not asking you to make the same album, but like, I want to hear that those same elements. Those I want to hear those fuzzy guitars. I want to hear the dynamics between the angst in Billy's voice and the power of the guitars. Like, I want to hear all that those elements. Like, it doesn't have to sound like those albums, but like, it still should be identifiable as Smashing Pumpkins. And I guess like if that's my biggest complaint, like, so be it. That's what it is. But like, I don't know. Like, I think if Billy just eases up a little bit and says, all right, we're gonna really connect with these things that made us what we were originally. Like, I think there's a great album to be had here. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right, I didn't prep you for this last topic, but I'm just going to hit you with it. So as I've talked about on this podcast, in the summertime I go to a place called Chautauqua, and there are concerts all summer long, and I go check everything out whether I'm excited for it or not. And a couple years ago, maybe last year, Frankie Valli was supposed to come, and that was when the Canadian wildfires were happening and the smoke was really bad, and so he canceled the show. This past Saturday was the makeup. He came back and he played. Frankie Valli is 90 years old.
Whoa.
He is 90. And
Holy cow.
For anybody who doesn't know, Frankie Valli did Can't Take My Eyes Off You, Walk Like a Man. You know Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. So Frankie Valli is on the stage, and he's got 4 backup singers. He's got a 5-piece, 6-piece band playing behind him. And I'm here to tell you that 85-90% of that show was lip synced. But everybody had the greatest time. Everybody was singing along and had a lot of fun. Mr. Snob in the back, myself, is going, yeah, he's not singing, and I can tell.
Yeah.
He's 90-year-old man is not hitting those falsetto high notes at all. He was talking in between songs, and I'm sure he sang some notes here and there, but I'm here to tell you he was lip syncing. But if nobody cared and everybody had fun, is there still value in a 90-year-old man continuing to get out there and do it, and until he cannot possibly do it anymore?
I'm sure I probably missed about half of what you just said, because inside my brain on a blackboard, Bart Simpson was writing over and over again, I will not make a joke about him being old enough to be president now. I will not make it. Yeah, like
4 more years. 4 more years.
And by the way, I like the fact that we could do things like this where I make the joke, but I'm like, well, I wasn't making the low hanging fruit joke. I was just pointing out that I knew it was there, but I'm not going to make the joke. Like
these are the political takes that bind us all. Nobody wants a 90-year-old man running the country. Yeah. Nobody.
So, all jokes aside, like, it is impressive that he's just going out there on stage at that age. I am, fortunate. I've got a grandmother who is 93 years old, and, like, she's still relatively, like, doing pretty well, but like, I can't imagine her traveling and going out on stage and trying to perform. You know what I mean? Like,
I looked at the bus. I looked at the bus behind the venue, and I'm going, you're telling me a 90-year-old man is still riding the bus?
I mean, that's just insane. That's absolutely insane. Like, I mean, how did he look? Like, was he moving around and stuff, or?
He was sauntering. He was not jumping. He was not like running, but I mean, for a 90-year-old man, he looked phenomenal.
Cane Walker?
Nope.
I mean, just that in and of itself is honestly impressive.
He's a little dude. He's 5'5".
Yeah.
and he doesn't have a single extra pound on him. He never got fat. He looks young. He looks young and vital for a 90-year-old. How about that?
How old is Bob Dylan? He's
81.
because he's out there doing his thing still, and so I feel like he's got to be at least 80 at this point.
He's 83.
83.
And I saw him earlier this year, and Frankie Valli looked more vital, but Frankie Valli was also standing next to 4 young backup singers who were crushing it.
Yeah,
like you want to talk about the greatest musicians in the world, and some of the greatest singers in the world are backup bands for these legends.
Oh yeah,
they're just unbelievable.
I would be surprised though if Bob Dylan was lip syncing. Like that would that would surprise me. I'm trying to think who else is like up there.
I probably would have enjoyed the show more if he had been.
That's fair. That's fair. Neil Young, he's probably in his mid 70s now. Mick Jagger is up there. Like, what is Mick Jagger? Is he 80 yet? Like,
Neil Young is 78.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Mick
Jagger's 80.
Yeah. So, and he's still out there dancing and prancing, doing his thing, so there's some guys who are up there that are doing it.
So let me tell you, on the one hand, like I get kind of grumpy about this stuff, when in Cleveland they announced that the big concert this summer at the baseball stadium was going to be Billy Joel and Rod Stewart. I just kind of groan because, like, I love Billy Joel. Rod Stewart is undeniably great. I like some of his songs, but like at some point, let's make way for some 50 or 60-year-old legends, and these 70, 80, and 90-year-old legends are continuing to dominate these tours and performances. But on the other hand, the place was packed. And I joked with a friend of mine. I was texting with a friend of mine who was also at the show that it was like I'd walked into the movie Cocoon, because all these gray hairs are kind of grooving and dancing in the back and singing along, and they're doing ballroom dancing in the aisles, and it was like a time capsule for them. And so who am I to steal the joy from all these people? Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, here, let me tell you a secret though. If that big concert announcement was Metallica and Pearl Jam, they would have packed that place too, no problem. So
even bigger.
Yeah. So you don't have to go that, like you said, let's get the guys who are in their 50s and 60s. Like, our bands have become the classic rock era. We're supposed to be getting these retro shows. So like, I feel like we're being like passed over for the previous generation. Like, come on, it's our time.
I know. I'm firmly in middle age.
That's right. That's right. Like,
give me my respect.
That's right. I mean, it's not fair that like when my dad was, my age, that the bands that they're booking now are the bands that they got. Like, when's it going to be our turn?
Yeah. I'm just waiting for I grew up going to see Johnny Mathis at Chautauqua, because Johnny Mathis always came through, and BJ Thomas. Remember, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head?
Yep.
You know? And so I feel like I already put in my time with this era of artists.
I would guess neither of those guys are still alive, right?
I don't think so.
I don't
think so.
But
last summer it was Diana Ross leaning heavy on her backup singers.
Yeah.
But I had a great time at that show too. So who am I kidding?
There you go. So I guess just keep putting them out there, If you book it, they will come.
Yeah. And I guess there's no good answer.
Yeah.
Frankie Valli will die on stage, literally.
Apparently.
All right. Well, I think that's enough of us for this week. You got anything else for the good of the order, Andrew?
No, I don't think so. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm traveling this week. I'm actually dog sitting for my parents right now. And so I've got a very patient puppy sitting beside me who's ready to go for a walk. So
for the YouTube people. Show everybody the dog. They love the dog, and then I'll sign off.
All right.
All right, everybody
There's
who's
Cody.
listening. Thanks so much for listening. We will talk to you next time. This has been the Album Record Podcast.